Okay, so I wanted to respond to one of the comments that I got on a video that I posted. There was a owner named Larry that wanted a little clarification on what you want to do when you're doing a keyhole. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, keyhole is when you've got an open root joint and you typically fit it up with a little gap, and you're going to take a 60-10 rod and you get a puddle going. You get a puddle going, and then you jab your rod into the puddle. Okay, so right in that crack, you're going to jab your rod right in there. And once you get it in there, the depth that you want to go, and this is how I show people out in the field. If I'm training a helper or something, I know how to do this. So here's your plate, right? And I'm holding it vertical. You want to know about flat, it's all the same. Anyway, jab it in there, and you're going to push it through, clear through. And you want to settle right about here, where it's just about flush with the backside of your joint. And it's going to be shooting fire through. And the reason we call it a keyhole is because it makes a hole that looks like a keyhole. Okay? So right where your rod is, it's going to be as fat as the rod. The hole is going to be as fat as the rod. But as you drag it down, or drag it flat or whatever, whichever way you're dragging it, it's going to fill in behind you. Okay? So you're going along, you've got a hole right there where your rod is, but behind you it's filling in, and you watch it fill in. And in order to do this, you got to have your gap just right. You got to have your heat just right. Your machine setting, everything. You've got to have the right size rod. Okay, typically when I'm doing these, and I'm usually doing pipe when I'm doing open root, I'll have a 1/8 5P rod, 5P plus, whatever. I like to do a 3/32 gap. Some tests that you take, they'll specify you got to have a 1/8 gap, which kind of makes it a little hard because it's a fat gap. But it's all how you set your machine. There's a balance that you've got to achieve between the size of gap and how much you're filling in and how hot you've got your machine and how fast you're traveling. And the only way to really do it is to experiment a little bit. But for my part, if I'm, say, running a root in a piece of pipe, I like 3/32 gap. I'll gap it with a 3/32 rod, okay? You're gonna get your 1/8 5P. You're gonna set the machine around 85 or 90 for the root, okay? And I'll just jam it in there, and with a pipe, you can hear it. Unless you're taking a test, they have tests where they make it so you can't hear it to make it harder. But you can hear it. It makes kind of a rocket sound. And you jam it in there, and you go just like what I was talking about, right about to the edge there, and you start dragging it. I like to go downhand. And you're going to start dragging it, and you can hear it going, and you can watch it fill in. But you can actually do this without even looking after you get practice. Guys flip up their hoods and talk while they're doing it, because it's all muscle memory at some point. You can feel, how hard you want to push, and you just drag it along and watch it fill in. Okay? Now there's some different things. Rod angle. Generally speaking, straight in is the best, perpendicular to your workpiece. But if you're having trouble penetrating, you actually want to drag it a little. It's a little counterintuitive, but if you drag it a little, it puts more heat. You can burn it in a little better. Let's say your gap tightened up a little, or your machine, you start up and it's running a little colder than you thought. You can compensate like that, change your angle a little bit. On the other hand, if you want it to fill in more, again, this is counterintuitive, but you want to push the rod a little bit. And it actually fills in better if you're going away from it. And all the rest of it is just achieving that balance. Sometimes you got to experiment a little. Let's say your fitter doesn't do you such a good job and he gives you a fat gap. I've taken a 5/32 rod before, run at the same heat as that 1/8 rod and compensate it. Sometimes you can bump your machine up a little, bump it down, whatever it takes, but basically you gotta You gotta play around with it a little bit. That's a good starting point that I just gave you. And you wanna just really observe it, and you wanna drag it at the right speed, and you do it a while, you'll get a feel for it. Drag it at the right speed where you can watch it. You can watch it just filling in behind you as you're going. And it's really nice once you get it. And it can make you a lot of money.